Welcome to the next episode of the Path Less Chosen pod, the podcast showing you the careers they don't teach you about in school. I'm Sol Hyde.
And I'm Jamie Khan. Today's guest is Alex Lategan. So he's from South Africa. He works in the travel industry, and he's got a couple of interesting bits I want to get into with him. He works for a company called Journey Beyond, which he'll tell us about, dealing with some pretty high value clients and organising their holidays. And then also he runs a bit of content creation and a YouTube channel, which we'll also drop in the description so you guys can watch it as well.
Sounds good. Why don't we get him on?
Right, Alex Lategan, welcome to the Path Less Chosen pod. So you work in the travel industry, which is quite an interesting industry for us to get into. So just to begin with, give us a bit of an overview about what exactly you do.
Right. So thanks, JMO. Thanks, Sol, for having me on. My name's Alex, as JMO said. I work in the travel industry as what's called a DMC. That's a destination management consultant. The easiest way to understand it to most people who don't know the travel industry is we're similar to agents, except we understand the destinations, the properties, the places to go in different countries, and we do that into Africa. So that's basically, where we come in. An agent will reach out to us. Person wants to go to South Africa. They want to see Table Mountain. They want to see the Big Five, maybe drink some good wine, have some good food, stuff like that. And we understand the properties, we understand the budgets, we understand how to put the trip together.
You already touched on the kind of destinations you're looking at there. I wanted to ask you a bit about the African side and definitely want to delve into what you do on the day-to-day job. But just to go back then, talk to us a little bit about growing up in Africa and if there was a time growing up led you down the path of doing the travel industry, working in the travel industry and working in tourism.
Yeah, no, well, I grew up in a family that traveled a lot. Both my parents are in the travel industry themselves, so that's how I sort of found out about it at a young age. But I think travel, everyone sort of loves traveling, but traveling as a passion and traveling as an understanding are two different things. Traveling as a passion is, going around because you love going to new places, experiencing new places, and traveling in understanding is knowing the destinations, knowing the properties, really understanding why they exist, how they help, everything from behind the scenes to what sort of people going there see. And I fell in love with the side of almost human satisfaction in that sense, because you sort of go and you get the messages about people having life-changing experiences, going to all these places, and you sort of fall in love with knowing that someone had a great experience because of something you did. And having grown up under my parents in that industry, you sort of get a bug for it.
You speak about the bug. When did you first get a good idea that you had the bug?
To be honest, to work in the travel industry side, it was probably around about 15. I traveled a lot leading up to that age, and loved traveling. Like I said, most people do. But really understanding that I like the travel industry side of things was around 15. A bunch of my mates were going on holidays and they were staying 6-7 nights at one place, maybe 8 nights at one place. And to me, that seemed foreign because we would go one night between a bunch of properties, and seeing different people, different cultures, different properties, different places just is so interesting to me. So around about there, I started to realize that it isn't exactly the same, and there's differences to travel, and had me look into it a bit more and learn a bit about what we are, what we do, that sort of thing.
How did you find that lifestyle as like a 15-year-old or during your school time, having to travel around so much?
The one night stuff that we were doing because of my parents being in the travel industry is, I'd say, rare. But for me growing up, it was the best way of seeing a bunch of new destinations and learning about a bunch of different cultures. And like I said, by getting that bug bite about why you would travel, why you love the travel industry and why you love going from different places to places rather than just traveling for an escape.
Your journey then, you went to uni, studied finance. How does that add up?
Well, to be very honest with you, as a matter of, travel, the one thing about the travel industry is it's a bit volatile, in the sense of travel's affected by everything. If someone doesn't have the money to travel, they can't travel, type of thing. So if there's a stock market crash or a disease or something like that, COVID was one of the biggest ones if you think about it, going back a few years. It's just a volatile industry in that sense. So there's always got to be a backup plan. There's no such thing as a direct path to anything in life. But the entire time for me studying finance and doing my accounts, doing my auditing, all that sort of stuff, I sort of knew in the back of my head that this is just as a keep it in the background if I need it. Save it for a rainy day, but definitely trying to move towards the travel industry.
I think that's a pretty familiar theme that we've had with a lot of people, that they say, you have this passion, but you always want a backup plan. Was that like a bit of a sobering thought?
Once I got to uni, the mindset sort of changed of, I know I've got to, put 100% into the degree and get the degree, make sure that takes as quick as possible, in the best way possible. You just 3 years, 4 years, sign it off, get the degree, get the piece of paper. Not hate the process and think I should be somewhere else, because I think that makes the 4 years a lot longer. But then it was when I was traveling, I was trying to 100% make sure that I was learning as much as possible, so that although I wasn't directly in the industry, I could learn about the other sides of it whilst I was still studying, and sort of picking up 5, 10, 20%, so that later on in life, that 20% is already there.
How did you keep yourself motivated during that time at university? Because it sounds like you always knew, even going to university, you knew you wanted to end up in tourism.
I think a lot of people at 19, 20 don't really know what they want to do. Yeah. And sometimes, parents make you study something. Sometimes, you don't know if what you're studying is what you want to do in life. So you find a good bunch of mates, you have a good time, as well as working hard. Gets you through it. A couple of pubs involved as well, obviously.
I remember speaking to you and you saying, like I want to be in Mauritius, I want to be wherever in Africa right now, but I've got an exam next week. So how did you find that?
So, and there was some trips that came up, that I could have gone on, but it was, again, understanding that at that phase in life, it was a give and take. If I had taken at that situation and then, failed an exam or had to redo a year, it's just another year later that I could get into the travel industry. So you sort of have to weigh that up, saying, it's one of those things where it's like a penny given up now is a dollar claimed later type of thing. So in that sort of mindset, and that's not to say that no traveling happened at that time of the year. Uni, one of the great things about uni that once you start working in the real world, you sort of had taken for granted, is the fact that you get holidays every 3 months or 4 months, whatever the case is, for a month at a time, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And you get used to that, even going into high school. High school, you have your terms, then you have 2 weeks in between the terms, and you have whole of December, January off. In South African case, I know up in England's a bit different. But you realize once you get into the travel, into the real world, you get your 15 days, and you make the most of it. You couple them up with as many bank holidays or public holidays as you can. And you just find your way around. And I think that's another thing that appeals to me so much about travel is, look, it's never an 8 to 5 job or a 9 to 5 job type of thing. It's always hands-on 24/7. If people are traveling, you're working. So times like December or Easter is our peak season. So we're working the entire time, whereas everyone else is traveling. So that's a mindset to have. But then, the pro of the industry is obviously getting to go to some places that some people dream to go to, and calling it your job whilst you're there. So
what is actually a day in the life?
So, for our company in particular, I don't know if I mentioned I work for Journey Beyond. It's a DMC into sub-Saharan Africa. We, deal with inbound travel. That basically means people coming from other continents into Africa. There is another thing called an outbound travel sort of operator. That's people that's in country. So that would be if I sent South Africans to another country, either in Europe or even to another African country. But we're very much inbound. So a lot of our market is American, is European. We get a couple of Australians, Indians. It's worldwide in that sense. So it's a matter of, if the agents are awake and they need someone to get a hold of, it's not a matter of, my day finished now at 5 p.m. I'll answer it in the morning because of the time zones. It's, you've got to get an answer out. And it's a constant balancing act between all the operators sort of work on the South African time, central time zones. So Americans tend to wake up around 1, 2 in the afternoon our side. So when those requests come in, you start prioritizing them, getting some answers from some of the suppliers that are still operating if you get an email that early, or first thing the next morning, answering those questions and then having answers for them when they wake up that next afternoon. So that's why there's no real time working hours in the sense. And I know a lot of people say that about industries, but in this sense, it is you've got to prioritize the client. The client's always king. And you've got to work towards their hours. If you're setting up a meeting, it's not what time suits you, it's what time suits them. And that sometimes is 8 p.m., 9 p.m. this side, to speak to someone in the afternoon their side. And then in terms of days, there are high seasons and low season travel. So in the lower season, you maybe get away with having a Sunday or Saturday off or whatever the case is. You're always sort of monitoring your inbox the entire time. But then it's a matter of, in peak season, it's 7 days a week, always at phone or on your emails, getting answers out, getting questions out. So
tell us a little bit about other difficulties you might face just doing the work you do.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest difficulties is about the expectations. People who come out and spend money on big trips and stuff like that, have high expectations and want the best and expect the best. And it's almost a stress on yourself knowing that this is going to be a representation of Africa, and forget the fact that you're promoting your brand and you're selling your brand and that sort of stuff. You want this person to come to Africa and fall in love with it like you love it. So the expectation of the people landing here, knowing that they have the right properties and stuff like that, that's the biggest stress almost to me, because again, it's generally a one-time trip. The reason people come back to Africa is because that one-time trip turned into the best trip of their life. And then every honeymoon, every anniversary, every, big birthday or something like that comes back out to Africa. From another point of view, again, going back into the socio-economic side of things, which is also why I'm actually very grateful I studied finance, and having understanding of the financial world, how money works, that sort of thing gives you an idea of why maybe people are traveling more and why people are not traveling as much, because everything affects it. The wars that are going on in the world with, what's happening in Palestine and Israel at the moment, Ukraine, Russia before that, COVID, before that, there was swine flu and Ebola and those sort of things out here. Any sort of negative press about Africa takes that person who's already tentative enough, knowing it's a scary destination to come out to, just fills them with that 1 or 2% more that may stop them from traveling out, type of thing. So understanding that side of it and what to do during that, and how to talk to a client and reassure them and tell them the whole process, because you understand the whole process. You've lived it, you've done it yourself, you've gone on the transfers, you've gone on the Soweto tours, you've gone to Uganda, you've gone to wherever the case is just more reassuring and helps the client sort of cope with the ideas.
You talk about having to be adaptable and deal with those difficult situations. How do you deal with it at your age, like versus people who are almost double your age, paying a lot of money to be on those holidays?
Yeah, it's a great team around me. The office back home, we've got 18 people, of which a lot of them are really senior. And I obviously have my parents around me that I can ask the big questions, maybe the ones that I'm scared to ask or uncertain of how to, word this email. How do I say no? That's a big thing that people learn at our age, is it isn't always people pleasing and saying, yes, 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 we can do it, we can do it, we can do it. How do you say no when something just can't be done? And then having a great team around you. Like I said, the office back home, there's so much, knowledge, so much experience in it, that I feel comfortable to be able to go up to, one of our senior consultants and say, look, I haven't been to this place. Have you been here? What's your idea of it? How do I tell a client about it? Do you mind sitting on a call with me whilst we talk about it? And, if the client asks a question, maybe answer it, tell them your experience. And it just becomes that little bit more relatable, that little bit more reassuring. And again, I sit there, and whilst the consultant's speaking, I'm still learning more and more as it goes. It's the beauty of the travel industry, and especially, where we sit in it as DMCs, is the fact that you never know 100%. It's impossible, because there's always this experience, there's always that property, there's always that country, there's always that bucket list item that you can live once and then 2 months later is completely different. To even say you have 100% knowledge on one country is impossible. But having that openness of mind to ask the questions, so from the people who have experienced it, and then having the great team around me sort of makes it easier to deal with the expectations, with the unknowns, with sometimes at this young age, that trying sort of circumstance that you find yourself in, that I'm very fortunate for. And if I were to give advice on it, is just find people in an industry or like-minded people and just ask the questions. Sometimes we get roped into being around people our age, thinking we know it all, thinking we have it all. Ask the questions, whether it's a small question of like, what's it like in Zimbabwe, to like a big question asking about like a certain lodge, their experiences, their expectations, how would you talk to a client about it, type of thing, and just picking up those sort of notes all the way around.
Where do you find the confidence to go through that? Where do you think that came from?
He's an arrogant South African.
Well, I learned from the best when I went up to England. Yeah. Anyway, the confidence sort of comes from the fact of knowing that the travel industry, everyone, I always say we have a bit of a tick, like we have a bit of a screw loose, and we're all actually very nice people in that sense, because if you're in sort of the travel industry into Africa, you have the passion for the countries, you have a passion for the animals, you have a passion for the people, the cultures. And once you're in a place where everyone shares the same passion, you sort of get that reassurance and that comfort when you're talking to someone, knowing that they're not just there for the sake of being there. They're there because they have a real sort of drive behind it, and it's the same drive as you. So, you go up to a person, you can spark a conversation for hours talking about one area of a country. It's not about confidence in that sense. It's almost the reassurance behind the fact that they're not going to look down on you for asking those big questions. They're actually going to look up to you and say that, you want to learn more. Let's do that. Whereas, and I feel in a bunch of industries, once you get into like a real rat race situation, the industry is a bit more closed off, a bit more, my information's my information. It's what makes me special. Whereas in the travel industry, it's all about, because especially in our case, where we're sort of the middlemen in a certain way, know that the suppliers all want the best for you because they want the best for them. In the same sense of the agents want the best for you because they also want the best for them, because we're in such a perfect line of, if everything works well and everyone communicates, the client's always happy. And if the client's happy, then, you've done your job well.
Yeah, I think coming from the angle of why we started this podcast and the path less chosen that you've gone down, I think if you came into anyone in the UK, and Sol's probably experienced this when he's told people he's moved out to Bali and he's doing some work there for now, people will kind of laugh and say, oh yeah, that's like a temporary thing, that when you're getting yourself back to England. And I think if I walked into a room and started telling people that I wanted to work in the travel industry, I wanted to learn about the travel industry, then it would be like kind of just like laughed off. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, go and find your 9-to-5 job here in England. That's too interesting, because that is the path less chosen. So when you talk about like learning from the people around you who share that same passion, talk to us a little bit more about how important you think having that environment around you to actually enable you to go down this path less chosen was.
I think the biggest thing about the travel industry is the fact that people tend to come into it with that golden curtain in front of their eyes, saying it is just glitz and glam, going around, traveling around, seeing new places, and don't realize the work that goes in behind it. It's why also there isn't everyone, because I always say to people, this is the perfect job. You get to see new cultures, new places, you get to travel. But it's the caveat to being able to have all those pros is the fact that it is just really hard work, and that you're constantly working. It's everything from people relationships to supplier relationships to everything in between. And then you're trying to have fun at the same time, which I think people underplay a bit in any job. It's why you love a job, is because there's pros to it and there's fun sides to it. So you're trying to balance that hard work and no working time to, the fun part of it, and traveling and seeing places. And then going into like how the people around me sort of shape that is just, everyone's very inviting. That's the way to say it. They always warn you about it. I think in my sort of 10 months, 11 months in the industry now, and then the 23 years of growing up under it, you sort of get warned about it, saying, this is hard work, this is hard work type of thing. So there is always that level of expectation that they set. And I think that's what helped me to come into the industry and not think it's just going to be, glitz and glam and traveling everywhere. Although I've been fortunate enough to go to a lot of places, and you sort of understand that before you understand the pros that come along with it. Because, in any industry, if there was a perfect industry from, ball one to the end of it, that's everyone would be in it.
100%. And I think recognizing that is pretty important. And it's interesting that you say that people love it, and then you actually realize what the industry's like. Yeah, I don't know, from experience of being out here with a lot of people who are traveling right now, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I really want to get into this line of work, but how do I actually get into it?" Imagine someone's listening right now; they love their traveling, and they know they're passionate about it. Yeah. How would you start?
So, look, I think the biggest part is having that underlying passion that you're talking about. You fall in love, and again, it's not with the travel side of thing in the sense of going to the place. It's the entire circle of it, of loving the fact that people had a great time, loving the fact that that you're designing a trip that people are going to enjoy. Understanding the fact that the hours that you put into a trip, the long nights, the early mornings, that sort of thing, all accumulates to one email at the end of it saying, I had the best trip of my life. That's the sort of side you fall in love with before you fall in love with the side of going to a place, because everyone loves traveling. I think people, if you ask the majority of the world, they all say, yeah, I'd love to travel. I'd love to go here. I'd love to go here. I'd love to experience this. You have to remember you're on the other side of that, where you're organizing that side, the people loving side. And it's all about the satisfaction of knowing that what you've put together sort of accumulates to that. How you would get into the travel industry? Look, there are degrees on it. There's tourism. Here in South Africa, you can study tourism and go into sort of a tourism side of things. You just sort of have to identify which factor you want to be in. Do you want to be on the front line in hospitality and being in the lodges, which is also fantastic. It's what my sister did, where you go work in the lodges, you're on hand, you're doing everything that a client wants, and you're the face of the country in that sense, which has its own expectations to it. Or do you want to be in the back line, like a bit like us, a bit like the travel agents of the world, where you are planning everything and ensuring that the trips are going according to plan, that everything is tailor-made to that person. It's, built into the itinerary, working towards a budget, understanding that sort of thing. And then if someone wants to get into tourism or into the travel industry itself, and they've understood that, there's companies out there, there's big agencies that have independent consultants in it, or you can work as a consultant for the agency. That's from the agency sides of things. So if you're a travel agent, sending people into places. If you're a DMC, look, the one good thing about the travel industry is there's always opportunity for jobs. It's all about knowledge, and not everyone's fortunate enough to be able to travel to places, but the biggest sort of caveat to that is just reading. You're reading about the history of a country, the areas that there, how much rainfall does it have, who's it suited for, because someone comes to Africa and it's the first time they're coming to Africa and they want to go to Namibia. I'd say to them, what is your expectation then? Like, do you want to see the big five? Do you want to see big herds of animals? What do you want to do when you go to Namibia? And they say, yeah, that's exactly what I want. And we as sort of people on hand know that's not what Namibia is great for. Namibia is great for its scenery, for its beauty, for return clients to Africa, seeing the little things, and then still seeing the desert elephants or the desert lions after they've gone and ticked off their bucket list when they've gone to South Africa or to East Africa and seen massive herds of animals, big lion prides, cheetahs everywhere, that sort of thing. There's always sort of line and opportunities in that sense. It's all just about understanding and product knowledge, and whether you can firsthand travel to a place, which is actually probably the best way to do it, or read about it and just take that time to understand a property, to understand an area, why you go there. That's what DMCs really look for.
What would your advice be to someone that's maybe listening who is stuck in somewhere like England, where we still have a tourism industry here, but it's obviously very different to going to see some desert lions? So what would your advice be in terms of like finding your niche and your expertise in terms of which part of the tourism industry you want to go and work in?
No, I just say the biggest thing, and I think this is any line or any work, is falling in love with what you sell. Selling something as a job like what I do sounds, corporate, but I love animals. I love, you talk about gorilla trekking in Rwanda, migration and stuff. I mean, it's easy to fall in love with those things, but everyone's different and everyone has their own passions. So if you fall in love with Devon and Exeter and you have a real passion about Exeter, you being there, I don't know what really goes on there, but I mean, if I use a country like Scotland with like Edinburgh with the history of the castles and stuff like that, people fall in love with that and they find their niche in that sense. And again, if you know an area 100% and you can sell that area, I did say earlier, you can't really know anything 100%, but you know a place better than everyone else. You can take them through a castle, in your head type of thing, and talk them through the experience. That's your niche then. And if you have a real love, a real passion for it, and it's not just because you want to get a few free flight tickets or stay in a luxury hotel once or twice a year type of thing, it becomes easy in that sense because you're just selling your passion. I do feel like it's a bit easier in Africa because we have, the cheat code of having animals and having those bucket list experiences, coming out here. If anyone does come out to Africa or has come out to Africa, they can tell you, seeing your first elephant next to your vehicle, or seeing your first pride of lions, or seeing Table Mountain, or the Boerkaap or any of those sort of areas, or going out to Rwanda and seeing that silverback gorilla, 5-6 meters away from you. The experience that stands with you, and you fall in love with that. And that's why sort of, if you're going to try and look for your niche, you got to know what you like.
I see you've been trying to convey that to people through a bit of content creation. Talk us through why you're moving into that and how that's going.
Yeah, so I decided to make a YouTube channel about a year ago. And again, it's all to do with the passion of showing the countries, showing the cultures. In my eyes, it's about showing, the experience, yes, but just what goes on behind the scenes. A lot of people always highlight, seeing the big five, what your room looks like, those sort of things, which I try and do because I know people like seeing that side of things. But then seeing what happens back of house, what happens with the community around the lodges and that sort of stuff, and how the support of the tourism industry goes into, sometimes less privileged people and building schools, building education systems. That's sort of where I'm trying to come in with my YouTube channel. It's Alex Goes Abroad for anyone else.
Easy plug.
And yeah, so creating videos on that, creating reels, it's more just about bringing awareness to African travel. I really do believe that travel into Africa is the best travel in the world. Yes, I know I'm 100% biased with that, but the cultures, the experiences, the countries that exist here, the people that exist here are just special and more special than anything I've ever been privileged enough to experience overseas. So that's just like my why in this, is to spread that message about African travel, about the people, the cultures, the animals, the areas that exist out here, and get more people out here.
And how did you find putting yourself out there on the internet?
Terrifying. Because everyone, every Tom, Dick, and Harry has their own opinion. I mean, I remember one of my Instagram shorts that actually did quite well. I made a comment saying that the average temperature in South Africa is 35 degrees Celsius in summer. I said 30 degrees Celsius. And then there's, Tweedledee with his Instagram saying, well, where I live in South Africa is 40 degrees, So, and I said, well, it's this massive country. How are you going to put everything under umbrella? So that's the terrifying side of it, because everyone has their opinion, and social media is so easy these days to get your opinion out there. But the overwhelming factor for me is the fact of my why in this is just to get people to love Africa and learn more about Africa. So in a sense, I'm not doing it for the self-driver in South Africa who travels Africa and knows it type of thing. I'm doing it for the lad sitting in Devon, Exeter, or the lad sitting in New York or whatever, who doesn't know Africa from a bar of soap, but has that want to come out. So for me, the why sort of outweighs the stresses of the social media world. It's technically a personal endeavor, but Journey Beyond is really close to my heart. Africa travel is close to my heart. So everything sort of goes two and two together. It's not like I have no sort of idea of moving on with social media entirely. It's just an auxiliary side of things. So extra promotion, extra sort of forwarding, extra putting out there to travel in Africa. So, it's just bringing more awareness. And then if someone sends me a message, I can allocate it to the team and say, this is the right person to talk to about that. The biggest sort of give and take that I have with content creation is there's what your heart wants to do and what your heart wants to put out, but then there's what the algorithm wants you to do and what sort of, Instagram finds popular or that sort of thing. So it's balancing that. I've sort of tried to balance it between, 50-50 between what I know could do well, because you have to get that attraction, you have to get that attention, and that's the only way you're going to get your original sort of heart-led content viral. And that's the stuff that you want to portray. So you try and get to a bit where you have a bit of an audience, have a bit of an outreach where you can start putting your organic message into all of them and really lighting that sort of love for traveling into Africa in my case, whether it's educating people on the path less traveled, like this sort of podcast. There's that give and take situation. You have to sort of do what goes well, or you have to do what your heart says.
Is the future for you in the travel industry, in content creation, and combining the two?
So travel industry is pretty much where I'm fixated on. The content creation on the side may just sort of grow a little bit more. I have no what's the word, aspirations of it being some multi-million subscriber YouTube channel. If it does become that, it's great, because I know then my message getting out to more people about traveling to Africa. But I love the travel industry. I love African travel. I love, the satisfaction that goes into putting a trip in for people. So it's very much so travel industry first, and having another resource of getting that message out there of why to get out here.
So to wrap up, just to give your final thoughts on the question we're asking all of our guests, which hopefully can be relatable for everyone listening. So if you were to go back to the start, maybe to that time that you first fell in love with tourism and decided you were going into it, give us one thing that you do the same, one thing you do differently, and also one thing or piece of advice that you tell yourself to motivate yourself to get to where you are now and where you're going in the future.
It's a loaded question, but the thing I'd probably do the same is just continue to fall in love with the travel industry, the little things behind it, and not just the destination and the end goal. I think the thing I'd look different is always a difficult one, because you almost feel like the path you're on is okay, and everything that's happened along that path has been for a reason. I think if I were to do something differently, was just to sort of try and understand the industry as a whole from a younger age. When you're young, you don't really know what you should be looking for, what you should be picking up on. So that's, if you're going to critique yourself at some points, that's maybe something that could have put me a bit further ahead. But just really being present in that moment, I think, as equally as important. But if there was one thing, and then to motivate myself, I think it's the same thing that sort of motivates me now, is just knowing that the trip we're putting together is going to have a real life-changing experience for someone, that whether they remember you or your company or the sort of person behind it all, doesn't really matter. It's that in like 50, 60 years from now, they sit around a table, they tell their kids about their experience when they came out to Africa, they came out to Zimbabwe, South Africa, they saw Table Mountain, whatever the case is. That sort of experience, that lifetime experience that sticks with people, is sort of the motivating factor to me every day.
Spot on, mate. Love that. It's so refreshing to hear from someone who's genuinely passionate in what they're doing and loves every minute of it. So hopefully Jamie coming in the next few weeks doesn't ruin that passion for you.
Oh, mate, I'm terrified. You talk about difficult clients earlier. JMO is hard work. WhatsApps don't stop. Can we do this? Can we do that? Yeah, mate. No, that's only 8 hours away, but I'm sure we can incorporate it.
I wish you the best of luck for that. And thanks for coming on.
Hundreds, mate. And hopefully in 5-6 years' time, when this podcast gets more than 60 views, we can revisit this and sort of see if any of the answers change.
Okay, there we are. Another episode done then. I thought that was a really good one, actually. So like we did with our other episodes, let's go into our 3 key takeaways.
The one takeaway is, like, for me, is being clear about loving what you're doing. Passion, but going further than that is that, like, genuinely every day knowing that you're loving what you're doing to the point where you can deal with all the bad stuff and it doesn't matter. Yeah. Another thing, being realistic about the fact that no job is the perfect job, but the positives always outweigh the negatives, and that's a good sign that you're in the place you want to be.
And then I think my final one was going to be, it's always sensible to have this backup plan, but that what he did was go into something that was relevant to what he ended up doing. So now he actually still applies those skills and has the backup plan in place, but it enabled him to pursue what he actually wanted to do.
All right, mate. Sounds good. Let's go with those 3. So to summarize, first one is being clear about loving what you're doing. Second is being realistic about your dream job. It's not going to be perfect. Third one is finding a relevant backup plan, finding something that complements what you want to do as plan A.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good summary again. I think there's some good takeaways there for everyone to use. And if people are more interested in Alex's stuff, they can obviously go and visit his Alex Goes Abroad YouTube channel. He's also got some good TikToks, probably better than yours. And also to look up the Journey Beyond website. The stuff they do is pretty incredible. But yeah, hopefully everyone found that interesting. Thank you for listening. And as always, if you did find it useful, make sure you followed us or subscribed on whatever platform you're using, and join us next time.